So I'm going to try and explain lasers in the simplest way that I can possibly think of. If there are any laser experts here, you'll know that it's a lot more complicated than this, but for those of us who don't know anything about it, I'm going to focus on YAG lasers, which are the lasers that are used for tattoo removal. So I have these lines here, and this is really simple, but the way we're going to work it is you're going to imagine this is the top, middle, bottom of the skin. Top being what you would see on your face, bottom being probably about as deep as where your hairs would come from. So if you plucked out one of these eyebrow hairs and it has a little root on the bottom, this is about how far down we're thinking about going. So when we are tattooing, say, a hair stroke, you're going to bring your machine down, just pierce the top of the skin, draw a nice straight line, take the needle back out, and if everything's working great, we'll have a hair stroke. As this breaks up over time, rather than staying in a nice straight line, the molecules will start to break up and they'll start to leave some little molecules in the skin. And at this stage, your client would come back for a top up, things would start to look patchy, and you would re-tattoo it again. If the tattoo has been done in a place where the client doesn't like, the colour's wrong, then they may be asking you about laser. So there are loads and loads of different lasers. We're going to talk about two different ones, just to give you something to compare it to. So split this down the middle. So let's say your client wants to have laser done on their face, and it's to resurface their skin and make their skin look younger. Lasers all have different wavelengths, and each wavelength reads something different or penetrates to a different level in the skin. So if they wanted to have their skin resurfaced, the laser beam would come down, and this particular laser beam would connect with the surface and just the bottom layer of the skin here, and it would basically blast it all off, and it would cause a wound. It would cause the skin to re-heal better than before. It would increase the collagen, and hopefully after the person had healed, their skin would be smoother and better than before. If we're looking to remove tattoo pigment though, these little molecules are a little further down in the skin, so a laser that only connects with the top of the skin wouldn't be any good. This is why we would then need an ND YAG laser, and instead of stopping on the top of the skin, this particular beam would come down, it would penetrate through the skin, and it would only stop when it connects with one of the ink particles. As these ink particles are connected with the laser, they will cause an explosion, and as all of these little pigment marks explode underneath the skin, like this, the skin on the top will swell up, and that's why if anyone lasers their client and they leave, they're all red and swollen. After these pigment molecules have been blasted apart, as in the previous drawing, they will be shattered into lots of tiny little different pieces, and these pieces will be small enough for the body to start healing. It will send signals that there's been a wound created, and as the body heals, all these tiny little particles can now be taken away into the lymphatic system, and it would hopefully be removed. Sometimes though, a client comes to you to have laser done because they've had their brows done so many times. So instead of only having a few particles that are floating around like this, if you were to look underneath their skin, it's going to be absolutely packed like this with molecules. They've had their brows done so many times, there's no more space left, you can't tattoo over it, the only option is removal. To be perfectly honest, when you try and laser brows that are as saturated as this, for me all that happens is the laser comes down, finds this particle here and blasts it apart. The particles on either side of it simply fall into the space and fill it again. So quite often these clients will come back looking like absolutely nothing has happened, and they start to get impatient pretty quickly. It's almost like if you imagine digging a hole on a beach but the sand is dry, and every single time you take a handful of sand out of the hole, more sand fills in on top of it. It may work eventually, but you would need so many laser sessions on a brow that was this saturated. You would cause scarring. Absolutely, no matter how careful you were, these brows would probably scar. So if a brow is oversaturated, you might find that you want to come in with your needles first, and use some kind of removal solution to try and pull some of this out, so that by the time you come to laser, underneath the skin looks a bit more like this, and the laser beam can easily find these particles, blast them apart for removal. Finally, we hear an awful lot in the industry about how titanium turns black whenever it's lasered. It is true, I have seen it. I do have some pictures of it coming up for you. When someone has titanium dioxide in their brows, which would be white pigment, instead of the laser coming down, blasting it apart and destroying it, it turns it black. The reason that it turns it black is the titanium dioxide, when hit with a laser, it doesn't react as normal, it doesn't blast apart. What happens is it basically cooks and it burns, and it turns from titanium dioxide into something called ferrous oxide. Once it's turned into ferrous oxide, I do hear a lot of people saying that once it's turned dark, if you continue to hit it with a laser, it will eventually sort itself out and disappear. But to be perfectly honest, I haven't seen that happen yet. I feel like once it goes black, that's it. So the danger of lasering brows that you did not do in the first place is that you don't know what was in them, you don't know if there's been some titanium in the mixture, and you don't know if they're going to turn a funny colour and make a bad situation worse.